XYZ. Check your zipper. Ooh. Whoops. Thanks, dude. No problem. Got your back. Right? There are many times in our lives where someone has seen something that's going on in our lives, going on with us, that's kind of not ideal, and they're letting us know about it so we can fix it. Hey Edge family, have you ever had a friend point something out to you that you were super thankful for? Maybe it was they were like, hey, you got a little food in your teeth. Or they're like, hey, your tag's sticking out. Or this happened to me, hey man, I think your shorts are on backwards. Right? Someone points something out to us and we are like, thank you so much. Or the classic XYZ. Check your zipper. Ooh. Whoops. Thanks, dude. No problem. Got your back. Right? There are many times in our lives where someone has seen something that's going on in our lives, going on with us, that's kind of not ideal, and they're letting us know about it so we can fix it. And when that happens, we're usually super thankful about it. Sometimes embarrassed, but thankful because it gives us an opportunity to fix whatever's wrong and kind of avoid catastrophe later. And so we are usually really thankful when someone lets us know that something's wrong in our life, right? Except when things get more serious. So it's one thing to have something in your teeth, or to have your zipper down, or to have your shorts on backwards. But it's another thing if someone calls you out on something a little bit bigger than that. Maybe they don't like something you said, or they don't like your attitude, or they're calling you out for a behavior that maybe you think is totally fine, or that everyone else does. And as Christians, this is kind of even amped up a little bit more because Christians, unfortunately, have a reputation for being judgmental. And so what does that mean? It means that Christians are often seen as people who are looking down on other people, telling others all the bad stuff they're doing, and about how they are so much better than everyone else. And maybe you've been to a church, or maybe you know a person who always seems like they're better than you. And they're always pointing out everything wrong that everyone else does. And honestly, it's just very judgmental. And so we don't want to be that as Christians, because that is just a bad reputation to have. But on the other end of things, there's people who say, I'm never going to call out anything anyone does because it's their decision. It's their life. I don't have a say in it. And so that comes across like, you know what? I wouldn't necessarily do that. But you know what? It's their life. They can do whatever they want. And sometimes we can take that too far, and people can be doing things that are wrong and should be called out, or that are harmful to themselves or other people, but we're unwilling to say something because we either don't want to have the awkward conversation, we don't want to come across as judgmental, or maybe we're doing the same thing ourselves. And the thing is, both sides of this coin, both sides of this spectrum, have its disadvantages. If you are always shouting at other people and telling them all the things they're doing wrong, it's going to come across as judgmental, and people are going to be turned away from the love of Jesus. They're going to be like, you know what? If this is what Christianity is all about, if this is what Jesus is all about, if this is who God is like, some angry person in the sky waiting to throw down lightning at every bad thing you do, then I want nothing to do with that. So that's bad. We don't want that. But on the other end, it can be bad too, because there are things in the world that people do that should be spoken out against. Whether it's an injustice like racism, or whether it's something that you know is just not good for someone to be doing, like cheating on a test or lying to a friend. Because those things hurt a person's character, hurts the relationships, or hurts the people around them. And so we don't want to let everything go, but we also don't want to be not loving to other people. So where's the balance? How do we talk about this? And one of the great things about Jesus is that Jesus, although he's been misrepresented throughout centuries, he is the perfect example on how to not just balance this love and this truth, but to be full of both. In fact, in the book of John, it says that Christ came in the fullness of grace and truth. Fullness of love and hard facts. And he was the combination of those two things. Not a balance of them, a fullness of them. Everything he did was full of love, and everything he did was full of righteousness, holiness, and truth. And so how can that permeate what we do as Christians and become what we become known as Christians? Because we're in this series called Love, Hate. And oftentimes the Christian community can be seen and known for the things we're against, not necessarily the things we're for. And we want to be known for the things that we are for. We want to be known for love, while at the same time making a stance for what's right. So the Apostle Paul is a guy in the Bible who had his life transformed by Jesus. He was going against Christians, persecuting Christians, throwing them in jail, and then he encountered Jesus, and it changed his life forever. And he spent the rest of his life telling other people about this Savior. And he wrote this letter to this church way back in the day, but it's a letter that has truth that applies to our lives today. And here's what it says. Galatians 6:1 says this: Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful to not fall into the same temptation yourself. And there are 3 things that I think we can pull from this verse to help us know how to address something that's wrong in someone else's life. Number 1, disciples of Jesus have different standards. Galatians 6:1, the beginning of that verse that I just read, it says this: Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin. It's talking about believer to believer, disciple to disciple, Christian to Christian. You know, it's not talking about if someone in the world, someone you know at work, someone you know at school, someone who's not a follower of Jesus, if they're doing something wrong, call them out on it. No, that's not what it's talking about. What Paul is saying is this: when you become a Christian, you are held to a higher standard. And yes, there are things that everyone in society should follow, rules and moral codes that help society flourish and that uphold the dignity of a human being. But when you are a Jesus follower, you step that up to the next level. You don't just care about whether your actions are hurting the people around you. You also start caring about whether something is hurting your own character and whether something is hurting your relationship with God. And you start caring about not just your actions, but the heart behind your actions. And so while everyone needs to be called out, like, yeah, Christian or non-Christian, murder is wrong, obviously, okay? But a Christian is held to a higher standard where if I have a fellow believer and I know that there's hate in their heart, or I know that they are prideful, I have a responsibility to call that out in them. Whereas if someone's not a Jesus follower, I would not. And here's an example, and here's a reason why. In Ephesians, Paul is talking about how we have been transformed by Jesus. And he's talking about how before we know Christ, we are clouded in our judgment, and our hearts are stone. But when Jesus comes into our life, he gives us a new heart, and this is what he says. Ephesians 4:23 says this: Put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. So what he's saying is this: we have been transformed from the inside out. It's not just behavior modification. It's not just changing some rules and laws and trying to follow them. It's actually we are transformed in the heart, on the heart level. And so as Christians, we are meant to be holy like God is holy. And so we're held to a higher standard. So what that means is we interact with non-believers differently than we do with believers. And if someone calls himself a Jesus follower, they are saying to you that you have permission to hold them to that standard. And it might not be welcomed, but if you are a Jesus follower, that's what you're signing up for. Because you're representing Jesus to the world. You can't take the name of Jesus upon you and then expect to do whatever you want to its name. If you take the name of Christ on you by calling yourself a Christian, then it's just like taking the name of a team on your back. You are representing that team. And so you are held accountable to standards that the team sets. If you don't want to be held accountable to those standards, you don't have to put the name of the team on your back. And the same thing with Christians. If you don't want to be held to the standards that Christ calls us to, then maybe you aren't really a Jesus follower. So that's the first thing. Believers are held to a different standard. So what I'm talking about the rest of this time is how do Christians call out sin in other Christians. And remember, this is a good thing. We are happy and we are grateful for the people who tell us our fly is down or our pants are backwards or our hair is crazy, right? We are thankful because it helps us avoid catastrophe down the road. Same thing with bigger things. We need to be thankful and grateful for the people that are calling things out in our life because it gives us an opportunity to change. Number 2, delivery is everything. So in Galatians, he says that you should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And in Proverbs, it says, through patience, a ruler can be persuaded, and a gentle tongue can break bone. What does this all mean? It's not just tell them what they're doing wrong and walk away. Because we all understand, just like in that Proverbs verse, a gentle tongue can break a bone. Oftentimes, when you come at something harshly or bluntly, and not in a gentle way or not in a humble way from a place of pride, people build up defenses and they oppose what you're trying to say, even if it's true. So it's not good enough just to say what's true. You need to say it in a way that can be accepted and that helps lead them to change, because that's the goal. So delivery is everything. Number 3, don't be a hypocrite. Don't be a hypocrite. In this same verse, it's saying, you who are godly, and it's saying, be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. There is nothing worse, nothing I hate more than having someone tell me I'm doing something wrong, and I know they're doing the same thing. Is that going to help me change? No, of course not. So don't be a hypocrite. You can't call someone out for something if you're doing the same thing. In fact, Jesus says this himself in Matthew 7:3-5. He says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? I love Jesus. He's like so creative and just calls things out. And he says, how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First, take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will be able to see clearly enough to take the speck from your brother's eye. So, if you see something that you know is wrong that someone's doing, they're disrespecting their parents, they're lying, they're cheating, they're stealing, they're not being pure in their relationships with their boyfriend or girlfriend, they're telling jokes that are not right, they're having racial slurs, whatever that is, they have bad language, or they're discouraging other people. Whatever you see in that person that you know is wrong, you should want to help them work on that. But you first need to check your own heart, check your own actions, and ask yourself, am I doing the same things? And if you are, don't just be like, oh, well, I can't call them out on that. Work on it yourself. And it's okay to still mention it to them, but tell them, I'm struggling with the same thing. And I'm working on it too. Can we help each other with this? So don't be a hypocrite. When I was in college, I had a really good friend who was a roommate of mine. And one day he just asked me, he's like, hey, Trey, can I just let you know something I've kind of noticed and thought maybe you should know? And I was like, yeah, man, go for it. And then he proceeded to tell me that when I am in a conversation with other people, sometimes I can come across as prideful and arrogant, or like I know all the right answers, and it's kind of patronizing to the people I'm talking to. Whether we're having a discussion or a disagreement or something like that, he's like, you seem to be a little prideful. And now, here's the thing, he's a really good friend. So he can say that, and he said it in a way that was humble, but yet straightforward. He called out pride in me, and it was really hard for me to accept. And for a day or two, I was in like denial, like classic denial. Like, I'm not like that. Like, who does he think he is? He doesn't know what's inside me. But as I kept pondering it, the Holy Spirit started working inside of me and convicting me and letting me know, no, Trey, you do have some pride when you think you're better than other people, or you think you can do something in a better way, or when you think you're right and someone else is wrong, and you have pride in conversations instead of humility. And so I was able to start working on that in my own heart. Now, I don't know if I would have ever gotten to that point, or it probably would have taken me a lot longer to get to that point if my friend did not call it out. And so that's what I'm talking about when we're talking about holding people around us accountable who are Christians. Because when we invite accountability, it helps us be better disciples of Jesus. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a fellow believer is to gently call out what's wrong in their life, help them see it as a sin, and help them change it from the inside out. So, Edge, I want to challenge you with two things. First, invite accountability into your life. Invite it into your life. Find someone, whether it's a close friend or a mentor or a small group leader, and ask them, hey, I really want to become a better disciple of Jesus. Will you hold me accountable to what Jesus calls me to? Invite accountability into your life and be serious about it. Set up meetings to talk about how your walk with Christ is going. The good, the bad, the ugly. So obviously this needs to be someone you can trust and someone who holds the same values as you. So invite accountability. And two, is there something that you know is wrong that your friend is doing that you're afraid to speak up about? We might think it's loving to ignore it or to accept them, baggage and all. But if we see someone doing destructive behaviors for themselves or others and don't speak up, we're a part of the problem. And so the loving thing to do is actually to talk to them and speak truth into their life in a way that's full of grace. So, is there something going on in a friend's life that you need to bring up and gently and humbly try to lead them to align their life more with the way of Christ? So invite accountability and speak for what's right. We will see you guys next week.